Hello everyone, and welcome back to another journey through history. Today we are stepping into a world that feels both familiar and impossibly distant. A world where wealth was measured not in numbers on a screen, but in servants, footsteps, layers of silk, and the echo of your own name whispered through marble halls. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine this. You awaken not in your own bed, but in the grand chamber of a Victorian mansion. The air smells faintly of beeswax polish, old wood, and coal smoke. A single ray of pale morning light cuts through the heavy curtains, tracing a line across carved bedposts. Somewhere beyond those velvet drapes, the city of London is already awake. The clatter of carriages, the toll of church bells, the hum of distant industry. But inside these walls, time moves differently. Before you can even stretch, a small bell rings. Not one you control, but one controlled for you. Within moments, the quiet hallway outside your room comes alive. Slippers shuffle, keys jingle, soft voices murmur. Someone knocks gently, and a voice says, "Good morning, my lord." This is how every day begins. When you are a Victorian millionaire, your bedroom is not just a place to sleep. It is a stage. Every object in it has a purpose, not merely to comfort you, but to announce your importance. The bed itself is a masterpiece of carving and upholstery, draped in embroidered curtains meant to block drafts or to hide the fact that even the rich shiver through English winters. On a nearby table, a silver tray gleams in the half-light. Upon it sits a porcelain basin filled with warm water, a folded towel, and a crystal decanter of lavender water, meant to refresh the senses before breakfast. You have not even set foot on the floor, yet half a dozen people have already been awake for hours preparing your morning. Your valet, the personal attendant every gentleman must have, enters quietly, his steps perfectly timed. He checks the temperature of the water, straightens the curtains, and lays out your morning clothes in a precise arrangement that never varies. He speaks softly, never meeting your eyes directly, because even kindness must follow rules. You, in turn, are expected to say very little. You are not supposed to thank him too warmly. Gratitude, like everything in this world, must be measured. A nod or a calm, that will be all, is enough to preserve dignity, both yours and his. Then comes the ritual of rising an act that, for the Victorian upper class, borders on sacred. Your slippers have been warmed by the fire. The coals were lit an hour earlier by a maid who entered silently while you slept. You sit on the edge of the bed, careful not to wrinkle the fine linen, and the cold air nips at your neck. The floor creaks softly beneath the heavy carpet, a reminder that even palaces are never truly still. You wash in the porcelain basin. The water is lukewarm. Steam curls faintly upward, catching the light. The soap smells of rose and tallow, not exactly pleasant by modern standards, but unmistakably elegant to Victorian sensibilities. Behind you, the valet waits with a towel and fresh garments. Shirts in this era are starched until they stand almost rigid. Collars are so stiff they can cut into the skin if worn too long. You might think this sounds uncomfortable, and you would be right, but discomfort in this world is a mark of refinement, proof that one's life is governed by discipline rather than ease. As each piece of clothing is layered upon you, undershirt, waistcoat, cravat, coat, the transformation begins. You are not dressing for comfort. You are assembling your identity. The process takes 20 or 30 minutes. Every button is fastened by hand. Every crease is smoothed by another's care. By the end, you look immaculate, but perhaps a little less human. When you glance at your reflection in the tall mirror framed with dark wood, you might not recognize yourself. There stands a person of wealth and status, but also a prisoner of ritual. Each polished cufflink and every perfect seam is part of a uniform that must never falter. Beneath all this elegance, something quiet stirs a sense of exhaustion, a longing for solitude. Even here, you are never alone. Every sound, the creak of a hinge, the whisper of fabric, the faint crackle of the fire reminds you that the house lives through your presence. In another wing, maids are washing linens and polishing the silverware for breakfast. The kitchen smells faintly of toast, eggs, and coal smoke. Footmen rehearse their posture in the hall before serving. The butler inspects the dining room, ensuring that the tablecloth hangs evenly, not a single inch off center. You have not said a word to anyone, yet your existence dictates the rhythm of the household. Outside, the world is changing fast. Steam engines whistle, newspapers spread gossip about new fortunes, and the age of invention hums beyond the walls. But inside, life remains bound by ceremony. To be rich in Victorian times is not to be free, it is to be watched. Every gesture, every phrase carries meaning. Rise too early and you seem restless. Too late and you seem idle. Dress too simply and rumors spread of lost fortune. Dress too lavishly and they whisper vanity. You live inside a play you did not write. Even your breakfast, waiting downstairs, is not merely a meal. It is another act in the performance. Servants, silver, and etiquette await you, as do the eyes of those who measure your grace by the angle of your napkin. But for a brief moment, as you stand by the window and gaze at the fog rolling over the garden, peace touches you. You hear the faint clop of hooves, the chirp of a bird, the sigh of the curtains in the draught. The fire murmurs behind you. For a heartbeat, you imagine what it would feel like to live without eyes watching, without rules dictating your every move, without wealth defining your worth. Then the moment fades. Your valet clears his throat discreetly. Sir, your breakfast is served. You straighten your collar, adjust your cuffs, and prepare to descend the grand staircase, not as yourself, but as the character society expects you to be. The day has begun, and the theater of wealth awaits its opening scene. The sound of your own footsteps barely echoes as you leave the bedroom, because most of what you hear belongs to them, the quiet rhythm of the household staff, the true machinery that keeps your fortune in motion. You descend the staircase, its mahogany rail polished to a mirror shine, and the scent of freshly baked bread mingles with that faint trace of coal smoke that never really leaves a Victorian house. The floor beneath your slippers is warm. Somewhere below, the servants have been stoking the fires since before dawn. To live as a Victorian millionaire is to never lift a hand for the smallest task, and yet to depend entirely on others for your every movement. A staff of 20, perhaps 30 people, forms an unseen army devoted to your daily comfort. But this comfort comes wrapped in constant choreography, invisible, precise, and almost military in its structure. The household hierarchy begins with the butler, the iron-spined guardian of decorum. His face rarely changes expression. His footsteps are soundless. His word, among the servants, is law. Beneath him stands the housekeeper, a woman of sharp mind and stronger will, who holds the keys to every cupboard and keeps track of every towel, candle, and curtain. She moves like a ghost in black silk, her ring of keys chiming softly as she passes. Between the two of them, the household beats like a human heart, disciplined, regular, and unseen. Each servant has a title and a task. Footmen carry trays and open doors, chosen not only for strength, but for appearance tall, clean-shaven, and uniformed like living furniture. Maids dust and polish, wash and fold, often beginning work before sunrise and finishing after midnight. Cooks rule the kitchen like generals, commanding armies of scullery maids, laundresses, and kitchen boys. Grooms and coachmen tend to the horses, their stable uniforms brushed as carefully as your dinner jacket. You, the master of this world, rarely speak to them directly. Orders travel downward, like ripples on water, from you to the butler to the staff below. You may never even know their names. And yet, every one of them knows yours, your habits, your moods, your silence. They know how loudly you step when you prefer your tea, which cufflinks you favor on cloudy days. They know the rhythm of your life better than you do. As you enter the breakfast room, the spectacle of control is already waiting. The table is laid perfectly, folded napkins shaped like fans, silver cutlery glinting in symmetrical precision, the china pattern aligned with the edge of the tablecloth. You do not pour your own tea. A footman does that. You do not ask for the newspaper. The butler has placed it near your right hand, folded to the page he knows you read first. But this perfection comes at a price, an invisible tension that hums beneath the silence. The servants, though unseen, are everywhere. Every word you say might be overheard through a door. Every expression might be repeated downstairs in whispers. The Victorian rich lived surrounded by people, and yet never escaped the feeling of being observed. In a strange way, privacy belonged only to the poor. You begin your breakfast. The food itself is simple: eggs, toast, marmalade, perhaps a slice of ham. Yet it arrives on silver platters, polished until your reflection stares back from the lid. The meal is not about hunger. It is about presentation. Each movement, lifting a cup, folding a napkin, setting down a spoon, is part of a quiet dance that everyone in the room has rehearsed. If a spoon is misplaced, the butler notices. If the toast cools too quickly, the cook hears of it within minutes. Every small error is magnified by the expectations of perfection. In Victorian society, the household was not just a home. It was a stage upon which reputation performed itself. When you finish your tea, you signal with the faintest gesture. A footman clears the table, a maid wipes the last crumbs from the cloth, and the room returns to its resting silence. You rise, but the servants remain perfectly still until you have left. Their day will continue long after yours begins, washing linens, polishing boots, preparing the fires for evening. Behind the grand staircase, a narrow door leads down to their world, the servants' quarters. Down there the air is cooler, the ceilings lower, and the sound of footsteps is constant. Here the heartbeat of the mansion never stops. The scullery maid scrubs silverware until her hands ache. The housekeeper records every candle burned, every towel replaced, every ounce of coal spent. The butler inspects the wine cellar, counting bottles as though auditing trust itself. You will likely never walk those corridors. You will never smell the soap, the steam, or the sweat of the unseen world that upholds yours. But without them, the illusion collapses. The gleam of your silver, the perfection of your suit, the very warmth of your morning fire, all of it is built upon the endless labor of others. And yet, this dependence brings unease. You sense, even faintly, that your authority is fragile. You rule your house through etiquette, not power, through silence, not command. If a servant decides to betray your secrets, a letter, a whisper, a scandal, your reputation could unravel by nightfall. Trust is currency here, traded silently in the corridors between upstairs and downstairs. This, then, is the paradox of Victorian wealth: to be surrounded by people, yet alone; to command obedience, yet depend entirely on those you command. As you walk toward the window again, the city beyond your estate is waking fully. Smoke rises from factory chimneys. The streets fill with carriages, merchants, and errand boys. The sound of hammers echoes from new construction, the pulse of an empire at its height. Inside, the quiet discipline of your household continues, unseen but absolute. You take a deep breath, straighten your jacket, and prepare to step into the next act of your day, a day that will unfold like clockwork, powered not by machines, but by human hands. The true transformation of a Victorian millionaire does not begin at breakfast or in the parlor. It begins in front of a mirror. Dressing, in this world, is not a matter of fashion or personal comfort. It is a ritual, a silent performance repeated every day, as vital and as exhausting as breathing. Your valet, the man who knows your measurements, your moods, and your entire wardrobe better than you do, stands ready beside a chair where the day's attire has already been chosen. The decision was not made at random. Every shade of fabric, every button and thread has been selected to signal something precise: dignity, restraint, respectability. In Victorian society, clothing spoke louder than words, and it never whispered. It declared. You stand before the mirror, still half tired, as your valet begins his work. He hands you each garment in sequence, never rushing, never faltering. The first layer is the softest, a clean linen undershirt, crisp and faintly scented with lavender starch. Then comes the waistcoat, stiff, structured, and symbolic of control. As it settles against your ribs, it reminds you of the invisible discipline expected of your class. Next comes the cravat, that delicate band of cloth that defines the entire appearance of a gentleman. It must be tied perfectly, neither too tight nor too loose, the knot shaped like a small piece of art at the base of your throat. One careless fold would suggest indifference, too elaborate, and you risk being thought vain. Your valet ties it with quiet precision, his fingers moving like a craftsman's. You stand still, breathing shallowly, aware that a single wrong gesture could undo the balance. Then come the outer layers, the waistcoat's second button, the coat with its fine lapels, the heavy trousers, the gloves. Everything must align flawlessly. The collars of the shirt, stiffened with starch, and sometimes even wire, press into your neck until you feel the pulse against the fabric. The shoes, freshly polished, gleam so brightly they could pass for mirrors. By the time you are dressed, your reflection is immaculate. But inside, your shoulders ache from tension, your skin prickles beneath the layers, and your breath feels a little shorter than before. For women of your household, the process is even more demanding. Imagine your wife or sister rising in her own chamber at this hour. Her maid has already prepared the corset, the petticoats, the layers of lace and silk that will form her armor for the day. The corset, laced from behind, tightens her waist inch by inch until she can barely draw a full breath. Beauty requires discipline, the maid might murmur, as if to comfort her. But what it really requires is endurance. Every garment she wears, from gloves to bustle, tells the world not only of her wealth, but of her ability to suffer it gracefully. Once both husband and wife are dressed, the transformation is complete. Two living portraits stand before their mirrors, polished, poised, and trapped. You both appear flawless, as though sculpted from the ideals of society itself. Yet every movement feels rehearsed. You cannot bend too quickly, turn too sharply, or breathe too deeply without risking a wrinkle, a tear, a hint of imperfection. Clothing in this era was a form of moral language. To dress well was to declare respectability. To dress carelessly was to court suspicion. A spotless shirt might signify virtue. A stray stain could ruin a reputation. Even the choice of fabric carried social weight. Wool for practicality, silk for display, and linen for moral cleanliness. The colors spoke two dark hues for solemnity, lighter tones for youth and optimism. Black was not just fashionable, it was a public confession of seriousness. As you finish dressing, the valet offers a final inspection, brushing a speck of dust from your sleeve, smoothing the edge of your lapel. He steps back, satisfied, and says quietly, "Perfect, sir." But perfection is heavy. It tightens around your chest like the collar of your shirt. You glance again into the mirror and see not just yourself, but the burden of being seen. Outside your room, the corridor smells faintly of furniture polish and coal smoke. You can hear the distant ring of the doorbell downstairs, a visitor, perhaps, or a delivery. In another room, the sound of your wife's maid tightening laces echoes like the squeak of rope. Life in this house moves with the rhythm of ritual, each motion part of a chain of duties that cannot be broken. And so you walk slowly, deliberately down the hallway. The morning light filters through tall windows, glinting off gilt frames and marble busts. You pass portraits of ancestors whose expressions seem to follow you, their painted eyes reflecting centuries of etiquette and ambition. You wonder, just briefly, if they ever longed to loosen their collars, to breathe freely, to be something other than the role they played. But you know the answer. In this world, identity is performance, and performance never stops. When you finally reach the staircase, the butler is waiting below, posture perfect, hands clasped behind his back. He does not speak until you do. "Breakfast is ready, sir," he says with a respectful nod. You give a faint smile, careful not to show too much warmth. Friendliness, after all, must be rationed. "Thank you," you reply. Then, descending the staircase, each step measured and deliberate, you feel the weight of your attire as if it were armor not against war, but against judgment. Every button, every fold, every layer is designed to keep the world convinced that you belong exactly where you are, at the top. Yet deep inside you sense the truth. Wealth has dressed you in fine clothes, but it has also bound you in invisible chains, the chains of appearance, expectation, and endless performance. Below, the breakfast room glows with sunlight and polished silver. Another act is about to begin. The air in the breakfast room feels strangely heavy, though sunlight streams through the tall windows, catching the soft dust floating above the table. Every morning begins this way, not with conversation or warmth, but with quiet choreography. To dine in a Victorian mansion is not to eat. It is to perform. Every gesture, every glance, every pause is part of a ritual that reinforces who belongs where in the invisible hierarchy of the house. The room itself is immaculate. The mahogany table stretches nearly the length of the chamber, covered with a spotless white tablecloth that has been pressed until it looks like silk. Each plate is aligned with mathematical precision. The silverware gleams, arranged in perfect symmetry. Fork, knife, spoon, dessert fork, butter knife, each one in its exact, socially ordained position. The smell of fresh bread and roasted coffee mixes with the faint scent of beeswax candles. Even the sunlight, angled just so through the lace curtains, feels as if it too understands the rules. A footman stands near the wall, still as a statue, waiting for the signal to move. Another holds a silver coffee pot, its handle wrapped in linen to protect his gloved hands. The butler, the silent commander of this domestic army, surveys everything from a distance, his eyes flicking across the table like a watchmaker, checking the gears of a clock. Every motion must unfold with absolute grace. There is no room for error. You take your seat at the head of the table, your chair drawn out for you at the precise moment you approach. The napkin is laid across your lap by a servant. You do not unfold it yourself. In front of you, a single letter rests beside the morning newspaper, folded exactly in half. The paper carries headlines about railways, trade, and politics, but you hardly read them. Your attention is divided between the silence of the room and the awareness that every sound you make, the clink of a spoon, the shifting of a chair, will be noticed. Your wife enters next, her gown rustling softly as she takes her seat. Behind her, a maid discreetly adjusts the drapes so the light falls evenly across the table. The two of you exchange polite words, greetings, brief remarks about the weather, perhaps a mild comment on the flowers in the conservatory. But even here, affection must be restrained. Public warmth, even between husband and wife, is considered undignified. Breakfast is served. The footman presents a tray with eggs, toast, sausages, fruit preserves, and a pot of steaming tea. He sets each dish down with deliberate precision. The butler nods faintly, giving silent approval. You begin to eat slowly, carefully, with the posture of a man aware that eating is not a private act, but a statement of refinement. Each movement has its rule. Bread is to be broken by hand, not cut. Tea must be stirred gently, never clinked. Your elbows remain close to your sides. Your knife rests diagonally on the plate when pausing. Conversation, when it occurs, follows unspoken etiquette. You never mention business at the table that is considered vulgar. Politics and religion are dangerous topics, capable of dividing polite company. The safest subjects are weather, art, or mutual acquaintances, anything that can fill the air without causing friction. Your wife asks, "Shall we receive the Ashcrofts this evening?" You nod thoughtfully before answering, "Yes, I believe so." The Ashcrofts are punctual. That single word, punctual, carries layers of meaning. It implies respect, reliability, and a subtle approval that those listening will recognize. In this society, even compliments are wrapped in code. Behind the walls of politeness, however, lies an unspoken truth. Meals like these are tests of discipline. Every morning is a quiet audition for continued respectability. A dropped spoon, a raised voice, or even too hearty a laugh could ripple through the household, whispered by servants and remembered by guests. To the outside world, the family at this table represents the ideal of order, but to those inside it, the perfection feels fragile, like porcelain that could shatter at a touch. You finish your meal. The butler steps forward, clearing the plate with exact timing, never too early, never too late. The footman replaces your tea with coffee without being asked. The silence of the house feels deeper now, almost reverent. Outside, the sound of carriage wheels on the gravel drive announces the start of the city's day. Inside, time seems to stretch and still, as though the mansion itself holds its breath until you rise from your seat. At last you do. The footman pulls your chair back. You dab your mouth with the napkin and place it gently beside your plate, never on it, never folded again. This small act, signals that the meal is finished. The staff moves instantly, collecting plates, lifting trays, resetting the table for the next event. The butler bows slightly. "Will you require the carriage this morning, sir?" he asks. You consider for a moment. "No," you reply. "I shall walk in the garden." The answer is simple, but it carries weight. To walk rather than ride suggests humility and control, a message that will not go unnoticed among those who pay attention to such details, which, in this world, is everyone. As you leave the dining room, you pass the grand hallway, its marble floor polished to a mirror shine. Servants bow subtly as you pass. You do not return the gesture, but you nod once, slow and deliberate, the mark of a man who acknowledges loyalty but never familiarity. Behind you, the clatter of dishes begins again, faint but constant. The staff continues its quiet ballet of order and obedience. You, meanwhile, step through the open doors into the bright morning garden, where trimmed hedges and marble statues line the path. The air is fresh, but even here freedom is an illusion. The gardener stops his work and bows as you approach. Every movement around you seems rehearsed. In this world, the simplest act, eating breakfast, walking through the garden, is never truly your own. It is part of a grand performance, a living portrait, painted each day in silence and silver. You glance once more at the mansion's tall windows, their glass reflecting the sunlight like 100 watching eyes. The day has only just begun, yet already it feels heavy with expectation. The servants will clean the dishes, polish the silver, reheat the water, and prepare for lunch. The cycle will repeat itself, perfectly timed, endlessly precise, a symphony of invisible labor beneath the calm surface of wealth. You take a deep breath, straighten your coat, and move toward the next ritual, the social obligations that fill every afternoon with measured charm and quiet exhaustion. The great houses of Victorian England were not simply homes. They were living organisms, intricate systems of hierarchy and labor that operated with the precision of a clock. From the outside, everything appeared effortless. The gleaming floors, the polished silver, the quiet elegance of daily life. But behind every moment of calm, dozens of unseen hands were working in perfect synchronization. It was order built on human rhythm, discipline disguised as grace. The master of the house, that is, you stood at the top of this invisible pyramid, but even your authority depended on others. You gave no direct orders that would have been considered crude. Instead, power flowed downward through a chain of command that began with your butler. He was the true conductor of this domestic orchestra, a man whose silence carried more authority than most people's voices. Tall, impeccably dressed, and discreet, the butler was not merely a servant. He was an institution, the guardian of the household's dignity. Every key in the mansion hung from his ring. Every secret eventually passed through his hands. He controlled the wine cellar, the dining room, and, in many ways, the mood of the entire house. When guests arrived, it was the butler who received them first. His manner set the tone, his bow, his speech, his discretion. A household could survive many scandals, but never a careless butler. Next came the housekeeper, the mirror image of the butler's authority on the domestic side of life. She was the quiet general of the servants, quarters strict, observant, unyielding. Her black gown and jingling keys were symbols of power as real as any crown. She oversaw the maids, the laundresses, and the kitchen staff, enforcing standards that bordered on military precision. Sheets had to be folded perfectly, meals served to the second, coal fires maintained at a steady flame. Even the scent of the rooms fell under her command. Below them, the hierarchy branched like a family tree. Footmen ranked above maids, but below the butler. Valets and ladies, maids, served the master and mistress personally, and enjoyed privileges denied to others. Cooks and scullery maids lived at opposite ends of the kitchen hierarchy, one commanding, the other obeying. There were grooms, coachmen, gardeners, and messengers, each tied to a specific corner of the estate's endless routine. Every task was defined by rank, and every rank defined by ritual. What made this system work was not kindness, but discipline. Each servant knew exactly where they stood in the silent social ladder that mirrored the world outside. No maid would ever address the butler directly without permission. No footman would question an order, even if it seemed absurd. Deference was the currency of survival. To break rank, to speak out of turn, to linger too long, to gossip within earshot was to risk dismissal, which in Victorian times often meant ruin. And yet, for all their obedience, these servants possessed a kind of quiet power. They were the keepers of the household's memory. They heard what was whispered in drawing rooms, saw what was hidden behind locked doors, and knew every flaw that luxury tried to conceal. The butler could end a reputation with a single misplaced word. A maid could start a scandal with one overheard secret. Your life, your image, even your marriage depended on their silence. Down in the servants' hall, far beneath the chandeliers and polished floors, a different world existed. The air was thick with heat from the kitchen range, and the scent of roasting meat mixed with coal smoke. Here, laughter and chatter replaced the stiff silence of the upper floors. The servants' meals were humble, bread, stew, tea, but they were shared with genuine warmth. Hierarchy existed even here, of course, but so did humanity. These people worked 14, sometimes 16 hours a day, for wages that barely covered their rent. Still, their loyalty often ran deeper than their pay. They belonged to this house almost as much as the house belonged to you. Sometimes, when the house fell silent at night, you might walk through those lower halls, not out of necessity, but curiosity. The smell of soap and coal lingers. The faint clatter of dishes echoes from the scullery. You hear laughter fade abruptly as your footsteps approach, replaced by quick bows and murmured greetings. For a moment, the reality of your position presses on you. The mansion feels like a vast theater. You, the leading actor. They, the invisible cast, who make the show possible. Back upstairs, the illusion of ease continues. A guest who visits your home sees none of the labor behind it. They admire the symmetry of the floral arrangements, the glow of the chandeliers, the warmth of the fire. They see perfection, a word that costs you nothing, but costs your staff everything. But perfection demands control, and control demands constant vigilance. You keep records of expenses and wages, maintain ledgers for wine and coal, and track the behavior of each servant through subtle observation. If a maid appears too familiar, she is reassigned. If a footman grows careless, he is dismissed. Reputation depends not only on how you live, but on how efficiently others live around you. And yet, the longer you maintain this delicate balance, the more you sense the fragility beneath it. You are a master, yes, but also a hostage. A single act of betrayal, a whispered rumor, or even a letter misplaced could bring everything crashing down. Every person who serves you is both helper and witness, loyal subject and potential threat. You rely on their silence as much as on their skill. In this way, the Victorian mansion becomes a perfect metaphor for its age, glittering above, burden below. The upper floors shimmer with elegance and manners, while the lower levels echo with sweat and toil. Together they form a structure that seems eternal, yet rests on foundations of exhaustion. Standing in your study, you hear the faint chime of the household clock, marking 10 of the clock, the signal that breakfast is over and the day's social duties begin. Outside, the carriage waits, polished and ready. Inside, the butler supervises a final inspection before you depart. Everything is in its place, everything under control, and as you step out onto the graveled drive, hat in hand and coat perfectly fitted, you realize that your home, this monument of order, is less a sanctuary and more a living reflection of your own life, beautiful, intricate, and entirely dependent on the quiet labor of others. By mid-morning, the quiet rhythm of your household begins to merge with the pulse of the outside world. The mansion, once sealed in silence, now stirs with purpose. Servants prepare your coat and gloves, the carriage gleams in the sunlight, and a footman waits at the door with a small stack of delicate papers, your calling cards. In the Victorian era, social life was a theater of appearances. Reputation was not simply what people thought of you, it was a currency more valuable than gold. Every smile, every visit, every absence spoke volumes. A gentleman's fortune could build his name, but only etiquette could preserve it. And so, your day's true labor begins not in the office or the workshop, but in the drawing rooms and parlors of polite society. The first stop is a neighboring estate, where you must pay a call. These visits are brief, often lasting no more than 15 minutes, yet their significance is immense. You step from your carriage with precise posture, gloved hands at your sides, hat tilted just so. A servant greets you at the door, takes your card, and disappears inside to announce your presence. Sometimes the host receives you, sometimes they do not, but even if you never cross the threshold, the gesture itself matters. It shows you, remember your duties, that you remain visible, that your place within society's network is still intact. Your calling card is your emblem, a small, cream-colored rectangle embossed with your name in elegant script, sometimes edged with gold. To outsiders it seems trivial, but within the strict codes of Victorian life, this thin piece of paper holds power. A folded corner might mean you delivered it personally. A black border signals mourning. To hand your card in person is to assert connection. To send it through a servant is to maintain distance. Every crease, every ink stroke, every subtle gesture carries meaning. You watch as your card disappears into a silver tray filled with others. That tray, in its own way, is a ledger of power, a silent record of who visited whom, who owes respect, and who has fallen out of favor. A missing card can wound pride as sharply as a public insult. Once inside, the visit unfolds like a performance. The parlor smells faintly of roses and polished wood. Lace curtains filter the light into golden beams, and a clock ticks softly in the corner. The hostess greets you with a smile that never quite reaches her eyes. Her gown shimmers. Her words glide like glass. The conversation is polite, restrained, and carefully meaningless. You discuss the weather, the latest charity ball, the Queen's health, perhaps even the state of the roads. Anything but truth. In this world, small talk is not a waste of time. It is a social art form, a delicate duel fought with compliments and restraint. You sip tea from a porcelain cup so thin it almost trembles in your hand. Every motion, lifting the saucer, replacing the cup, is part of the silent grammar of respectability. To speak too loudly is vulgar. To speak too softly is aloof. You must exist in perfect moderation, a portrait of calm precision. After exactly 15 minutes, you rise. The hostess nods politely, and you leave your chair as though you were never there. A servant retrieves your hat. You exchange final pleasantries. So lovely to see you. Such delightful company. We must do this again. Soon phrases that everyone knows mean little, but that must always be spoken. Then, with a graceful bow, you leave. Back in the carriage, the door closes with a muffled thud, and the world outside moves again. The horse's hooves strike the cobblestones in rhythm, and you exhale quietly. Every visit, every greeting, every carefully measured smile is a piece of armor in your ongoing campaign to remain relevant in society's endless hierarchy. Throughout the day, your route continues, one house, then another, then another. Some visits are genuine, others merely strategic. A friend's invitation accepted today might secure an ally tomorrow. A casual conversation might lead to an introduction, an investment, or a marriage proposal that binds two families together. Every handshake is a transaction, every glance a negotiation. Even absence carries meaning. To ignore an invitation is to send a message. To decline too often is to invite suspicion. Too eager, and you appear desperate. Too distant, and you risk being forgotten. The delicate balance between presence and mystery defines your entire social existence. By late afternoon, you return home, your mind a swirl of polite exchanges and unspoken judgments. The butler meets you at the door and hands you a silver tray of incoming cards. Visitors who have called on you while you were away. You study the names carefully. Lady Whitmore, the Ashcrofts, Lord Pennington. Each name represents a relationship that must be maintained, a connection that demands attention. You instruct your secretary to schedule replies, knowing that each response must match the tone and timing of the original gesture. Social life in Victorian England is less about sincerity and more about choreography. It is a performance in which everyone knows their role and the price of forgetting it. The poor labor with their hands, the wealthy labor with their manners. Later that evening, as you sit in your study, you find yourself reflecting on this strange economy of appearances. Your fingers trace the edges of a calling card, still resting on the desk. Such a small thing, fragile, silent, easily torn, yet it holds the weight of reputation. A man could lose his fortune and still recover, but to lose his place in society, that is exile. Through the tall windows, the city glows in twilight. Carriages roll past, lamps flicker on, and somewhere in the distance, church bells toll the hour. In the drawing rooms of London, hundreds of other people are doing exactly what you did today, smiling, bowing, exchanging cards and phrases, all to preserve the illusion of harmony. For a moment you wonder how much of it is real, whether these courtesies hold any truth, or whether they are simply the price one must pay for belonging. But before the thought can linger, the butler knocks gently. "Dinner will be served at 7, sir." You nod, setting the card back on the desk. The performance never ends. It merely shifts scenes. The polite theater of the morning gives way to the grandeur of the evening, where the stakes are even higher and the gestures even more precise. You rise, adjust your cuffs, and take one last look at your reflection in the glass. The same calm, composed figure the world expects to see. The lamps outside shimmer in the fog like watchful eyes. You turn away and walk toward the dining room. The next act of your carefully constructed day is about to begin. Evening descends over the mansion like a slow exhale, the golden light fading from the windows, the air thick with the faint scent of coal smoke and perfume. The working day for the city outside may be over, but Within your walls, the real labor of the upper class is only beginning. For the Victorian millionaire, leisure is not rest. It is presentation. It is the second act of the day's grand performance, where charm replaces authority and grace becomes a form of endurance. The first preparation begins in the drawing room. Servants light dozens of candles and adjust every lamp so that the glow flatters without revealing. Shadows must fall in the right places, soft across the portraits, warm on the marble floor, never too harsh upon the guests. Faces. A pianist, perhaps one of your nieces, or a hired musician rehearses quietly in the corner, her fingers brushing across ivory keys that gleam like pearls. The scent of waxen roses drifts through the air. You stand near the fireplace, your evening attire freshly brushed, a diamond pin catching the firelight. Your wife, radiant in silk and lace, descends the staircase, her corset laced so tightly that each breath seems deliberate. The servants adjust chairs, pour sherry into crystal decanters, and prepare trays of delicate cakes and sugared fruit. When the clock strikes 8, the first carriage arrives. Guests enter with polite laughter and practiced smiles. Each greeting is a performance in miniature, a handshake, a compliment, a subtle measurement of worth. The women's dresses shimmer under the gaslight, their gloves spotless, their jewels whispering with every gesture. The men's collars gleam, their waistcoats stiff, their conversation polished to civility. There is no spontaneity here, no loud jokes or careless gestures. Every smile is measured, every phrase rehearsed. The evening unfolds in a sequence of scenes. In the parlor, small groups gather around the tea table or the fireplace, discussing the opera, the latest inventions, or the Queen's recent public appearance. Music floats through the rooms, sometimes accompanied by laughter that sounds just slightly too perfect. A young lady plays a Chopin nocturne, her hands trembling only slightly. Another recites a poem, her voice soft and sentimental. The guests applaud politely, never too loudly, never too long. You move among them with the effortless poise of a practiced actor. You know exactly how long to remain in each conversation, when to smile, when to nod, when to shift attention. You must appear interested in everything, but attached to nothing. In Victorian society, visible enthusiasm could be mistaken for weakness, and too much silence for arrogance. The art lies in balance, in seeming endlessly sociable, while revealing nothing of yourself. Beyond the parlor, another world hums quietly. The servants glide through the rooms like shadows, refilling glasses, replacing candles, sweeping crumbs from the carpet without ever interrupting the flow of conversation. Their presence is essential yet invisible. They are trained to pass unnoticed, silent ghosts, ensuring that the illusion of effortless luxury remains intact. Later in the evening, conversation moves to the card table, whist or bridge, perhaps games of strategy and restraint, where losing gracefully is more important than winning. The men discuss politics in vague terms, hinting at business ventures but never naming sums. The women, gathered near the piano, exchange compliments veiled as competition. Your gown is exquisite, Lady Whitmore. I do hope your dressmaker is not too overburdened with clients. The smiles are sweet. The tone is edged with steel. Every gesture tonight, no matter how small, serves a purpose. The dinner you hosted last week may be repaid with an invitation next month. A kind word to the right guest may open a door to influence. A careless remark might close one forever. You have learned to read glances the way others read letters. A raised eyebrow here, a lowered voice there. Each detail carries its own hidden message. Yet, beneath the glitter and warmth, There is a strange kind of loneliness. The laughter never quite reaches the heart. The compliments sound like echoes. Every word, every smile, every toast feels rehearsed. You find yourself longing, just for a moment, for silence, for a space where you might speak freely without fear of misunderstanding or gossip. But such freedom has no place here. As the hour grows late, the room begins to cool. Guests rise slowly, offering polite farewells and promises of future visits. Carriages are called. Cloaks are brought. The butler opens the great doors, bowing slightly as the guests step into the fog. Their laughter fades into the night, blending with the sound of horses and wheels on cobblestones. The moment the doors close, the entire house exhales. The servants move swiftly to extinguish the candles, collect glasses, and clear the remains of the evening. The piano falls silent, its open lid reflecting the last flicker of the hearth. The scent of perfume lingers, mingling with the smoke and wax. You stand alone in the empty room. The silence feels heavy, almost sacred. You glance around at the gilded mirrors, the portraits on the walls, the half-finished glasses of wine. For a brief moment, you wonder if any of this is real, or if it is all a carefully constructed dream held together by habit and fear of falling out of favor. Upstairs, the housekeeper begins her rounds, locking doors and checking lamps. The servants retreat to their quarters below. The great mansion grows still again, like a stage after the play has ended. You remove your gloves, your pin, your perfectly tailored coat, and feel the weight of the evening settle on your shoulders. The performance is over, but another will begin tomorrow. For the Victorian elite, even rest must wait until decorum is satisfied. You blow out the last candle and watch as the smoke curls upward, fading into the dark. For the first time all day, the silence belongs to you alone. The day's quiet rituals, the careful dressing, the practiced smiles, the polite visits all lead to this moment. In the Victorian world, dinner is not simply a meal. It is the stage upon which status, power, and reputation are most vividly displayed. Every light, every sound, every movement is part of a larger performance, and you, the host, are its lead actor. The grand dining hall awaits. Servants move like clockwork to ensure perfection before the guests arrive. The fire glows warmly in the marble hearth. The chandeliers sparkle like constellations overhead, and the long mahogany table gleams beneath its white linen cloth. Rows of candles flicker, mirrored in the polished silverware. At each seat, a folded napkin stands upright, a silent promise of civility. The air carries the faint aroma of roasted meats, buttered vegetables, and aged wine, a scent that is both comforting and commanding. The butler makes his final inspection, his white-gloved hands adjusting every detail, a fork a half-inch to the left, a centerpiece turned slightly to catch the candlelight, a wine-glass realigned with its shadow. Behind him, the footmen line up in formal order, their livery immaculate, their expressions neutral. They are trained not to look at the guests, only to anticipate their needs, to refill a glass before it is empty, to clear a plate without a sound. When the clock strikes 7, the first carriage arrives. You greet your guests in the grand hallway, exchanging the ritual words of welcome. "How delightful to see you, Lady Whitmore." "Lord Pennington, your journey was comfortable, I trust." Every greeting is a calculated balance, warm enough to please, restrained enough to impress. To the Victorians, social grace is not mere politeness, it is survival. Once all are gathered, the butler announces, "Dinner is served." The guests proceed in order of rank, the highest born woman on the arm of the host, the most distinguished gentleman escorting the hostess. Conversation hums, like the faint sound of an orchestra tuning before the overture. As everyone takes their seats, a delicate silence falls. The first course arrives. The meal unfolds in a series of acts 12, sometimes 15 courses, each more elaborate than the last. Soup, fish, poultry, roast meats, puddings, pastries, fruit, cheeses, wine, liqueurs. Every plate is a work of art. You eat slowly, with deliberate elegance, cutting small portions, lifting each bite with your wrist held just so. To appear hurried is vulgar. To appear indifferent is worse. The art lies in seeming both at ease and in control. Conversation at the table is its own performance. The topics are limited, the tone subdued. One does not discuss money or politics. One observes, comments, and flatters. A lady might praise the flowers in the conservatory, or remark on the weather in Bath. A gentleman might mention the latest railway development, but only as a matter of curiosity, never business. Words must sparkle like crystal light, graceful, harmless. At the center of it all sits you, the host, responsible for maintaining the fragile equilibrium of charm and formality. You must keep the conversation flowing without dominating it, laugh at the right moments, offer compliments that sound spontaneous but are rehearsed in spirit. You signal the servants subtly, a glance for wine, a slight raise of the hand for the next course. To falter is to reveal weakness. To overdo it is to seem ostentatious. And yet, beneath the elegance, tension hides like a shadow under silk. A single mistake can ripple through the evening. A servant dropping a dish, a guest using the wrong fork, a misplaced comment that offends delicate sensibilities. Even the placement of the seating chart could spark whispers. If a certain lady sits too close to a certain gentleman, tongues might wag for weeks. Dinner in the Victorian age is a dance on a knife's edge, where every misstep leaves a mark that etiquette cannot erase. Sometimes you catch glimpses of your staff in motion, a footman's hand trembling as he pours the wine, the cook's anxious eyes peeking from the doorway to see if her dishes please. Their labor sustains your illusion of ease, but they, too, are part of the spectacle. The grandeur of your world depends on their invisibility. Between courses there is laughter, polite, melodic, never loud. A story is told about a duchess's lost fan at the opera. Another guest recalls a scandal involving an over-ambitious debutante. The room fills with amusement, the laughter carefully measured to avoid impropriety. In these moments, the dinner table becomes a mirror of society itself, beautiful, fragile, and entirely governed by appearance. When dessert arrives, sugared fruit, molded gelatin, a tower of pastries dusted with gold leaf, the air feels lighter, though the ritual is far from over. The final glass of wine is poured, and the ladies excuse themselves to the drawing-room. The gentlemen remain for port and cigars, discussing matters they would never mention before their wives. Even this separation is steeped in unspoken rules. Women embody refinement, men discretion. Later, when you join the ladies, the evening drifts into soft music and subdued conversation. A pianist plays, a few couples dance, and the butler quietly dims the lights. The air feels almost serene, though beneath the calm lies exhaustion, the fatigue of constant vigilance. At last, the carriages are called. Guests rise, offering their farewells. Compliments flow freely. A most delightful evening. Your cook is beyond compare. We must repay your hospitality soon." The butler opens the great doors, bowing as each visitor departs into the misty night. The wheels of their carriages fade into the distance, swallowed by the fog. Only then does the mansion exhale. The servants begin their silent cleanup, stacking plates, clearing glasses, polishing silver, until the reflections return. You linger a moment in the empty dining hall, surrounded by the scent of candle smoke and fading perfume. The candles flicker low, their flames shrinking to embers. The long table, stripped of its splendor, looks almost ghostly now, a reminder that even grandeur, when stripped bare, reveals only emptiness. You loosen your collar slightly, finally allowing yourself to breathe. For hours you have been perfect, poised, graceful, untouchable. Now, in the quiet aftermath, you feel the weight of that perfection settle like dust on your shoulders. Tomorrow the cycle will begin again, dressing, visiting, smiling, hosting the endless theater of civility. For now, though, you linger in the silence, the echoes of laughter still floating faintly in the air, like music fading from a distant ballroom. The guests are gone. The silver is polished again. The servants' footsteps have faded into the lower floors, and the mansion stands still in the dim glow of dying candles. Outside, the city of London breathes under a blanket of fog, the distant rumble of carriages, the faint cry of a newspaper boy, the lonely toll of a midnight bell. Inside, the air feels heavy, the silence almost alive. For a Victorian millionaire, this is the quietest hour of the day, and the most dangerous, because when the applause of society fades, when the chatter of polite company disappears, what remains is the echo of your own reputation. In this world, image is everything, and even silence can feel like judgment. You sit alone in your study, a brandy glass resting beside a stack of letters. The room smells of smoke, leather, and ink. The fire burns low, casting long shadows on the portraits that line the walls, the faces of ancestors who seem to watch you with unyielding expectation. They too once played this same game: charm in public, composure in private, vigilance always. Their painted eyes seem to whisper, "Do not falter." In Victorian society, reputation is both crown and shackle. It dictates who may dine with whom, who may marry whom, who is trusted, who is shunned, and it is terrifyingly fragile. A single rumor whispered in the wrong ear can undo years of perfection. A misplaced glance, an overheard phrase, a servant's careless story, each can grow into a scandal that spreads like fire through drawing rooms and dinner tables. You remember the fate of others' families, destroyed not by crime, but by gossip. A baroness whose laughter at a funeral was deemed unfeeling, a gentleman who went bankrupt after his business partner was caught cheating, a young heiress who danced twice with the same man at a ball and was labeled indecent. In this world, truth matters far less than perception. The wrong story told at the right time can turn anyone into an outcast. That is why, even in solitude, you are never truly free. You scan the day's correspondence carefully, rereading each word before it leaves your house. A letter too warm might seem improper, one too cold, arrogant. The newspapers are both ally and enemy. They flatter your donations to charity, but they also hint at your fortune's origins, always with that sly Victorian phrasing, "It is said his wealth derives from certain overseas enterprises." You know what that means. Everyone does. Yet no one dares to say it aloud. The servants, too, are part of this fragile web. They know everything, your habits, your arguments, your absences. Their silence is purchased, not guaranteed. You must treat them with distance and dignity, enough to earn respect, but not familiarity. Too much kindness invites gossip. Too much severity invites revenge. You rely on their discretion, even as you fear their whispers. As the clock strikes midnight, you rise and cross to the window. The fog presses against the glass, blurring the gaslights outside. For a moment, your reflection merges with the darkness, one more ghost among many in this house of appearances. You wonder how long you can sustain it, this constant vigilance, this balancing act between admiration and exposure. Because beneath the luxury, anxiety hums like an unseen engine. Every dinner, every visit, every invitation carries risk. To be absent too often suggests illness or scandal. To appear too eager marks you as insecure. Even generosity must be timed and measured. Charity is not compassion, but theater. You donate to orphanages not for their sake, but for the announcement that follows in the newspaper the next day. Sir Jonathan Wycliffe, noted for his benevolence, has endowed. The applause is brief. The cost, eternal. In the quiet, your mind replays the evening. Did Lady Whitmore notice your hesitation when she mentioned the railway investment? Did the cook overhear Lord Pennington's remark about your cousin's debts? Did the wine spill too close to the Duchess's gown? Each trivial moment feels sharp now, cutting through your thoughts like a blade. You tell yourself, these are small things, but you know better. In this world, reputations crumble by inches, not by blows. You pour another glass of brandy, but it offers little comfort. The fire hisses softly as a log collapses into embers. You can hear the faint ticking of the clock, the same rhythm that rules every hour of your life. For the first time you envy the simplicity of the servants below. They have no name to protect, no face to save. Their exhaustion is physical. Yours is invisible. A gust of wind rattles the window pane, and you look again at your reflection. Tired eyes, perfect collar, impeccable posture. You hardly recognize yourself. Somewhere along the years, the line between who you are and who you must appear to be has vanished. You are both master and prisoner, admired and feared, envied and alone. Outside, the last carriage rolls by. You hear its wheels fade into the fog, leaving only the sound of the wind and the whisper of your own thoughts. You close the curtains, shut the study door, and extinguish the lamps. The darkness feels almost merciful. It hides everything that daylight demands you to be. As you climb the stairs, the silence follows. You pass portraits and chandeliers, every object reflecting your success, every reflection reminding you of its cost. At the landing, you pause for a moment, resting your hand on the banister. Somewhere deep within the house, a floorboard creaks, a servant still awake, or perhaps the house itself sighing beneath the weight of its secrets. In the end, reputation is not something you own. It owns you. It dictates your friends, your manners, your voice, your smile. You protect it, feed it, polish it, and it watches you like an unblinking eye. You reach your bedroom door, remove your coat, and let out a breath you did not realize you had been holding. Tomorrow will begin again, the same rituals, the same restraint, the same silent performance, and you will play your part flawlessly, because in this world, perfection is survival, and fear is the price of grace. The morning sun filters gently through the lace curtains of your wife's sitting room. Its light, soft and golden, falls across vases of roses, portraits in silver frames, and the faint shimmer of silk upholstery. The air smells of lavender and polished wood. It is a peaceful scene, yet peace in a Victorian household is seldom what it seems. Beneath the calm surface lies a carefully maintained illusion, an arrangement built less on affection and more on alliance, less on love and more on legacy. Marriage, for the Victorian elite, is not a union of hearts. It is a strategy. It is property, bloodline, and status, woven together in the shape of a contract. When you married, it was not for companionship or passion. It was for stability, respectability, and continuation. Your fortune required an heir. Your name required dignity. And your house, this grand machine of elegance, required a hostess who could perform perfection as effortlessly as you. Your wife understands this as clearly as you do. She was raised for it, trained from girlhood to manage appearances, emotions, and entire staffs with quiet grace. Her world is a stage of smaller rooms. The nursery, the sewing parlor, the drawing room, each carries its own etiquette, its own invisible script. She knows how to move within it, when to smile, when to faint delicately from fatigue, when to compliment another woman's gown just enough to seem kind but never inferior. The two of you coexist within a choreography so precise that it could be mistaken for love. At breakfast, you exchange polite greetings. At dinner, you sit across from each other in measured silence. In public, you offer your arm as you walk. In private, you offer civility, rarely anger, rarely affection. Emotion in excess, after all, is dangerous in polite society, too human, too unpredictable. Yet, within this framework of restraint, something like partnership does exist. You are bound not by tenderness, but by shared understanding, a mutual need to maintain the image that feeds your world. You play your part, and she plays hers. When guests arrive, she becomes the portrait of refinement, gracious, witty, composed. She knows every name, every social detail, every rumor worth repeating, and every one better left unsaid. When she laughs, it is melodic but measured. When she praises, it sounds sincere but calculated. And you, standing beside her, nod approvingly. The perfect husband in the theater of respectability. Together you manage not a marriage, but an empire, the empire of appearances. She governs the household's social calendar, the servants, behavior, the tone of your soirees. You manage the finances, the estate, and the flow of your family's reputation. Between you lies a silent contract. She preserves grace. You preserve control, and in this balance, both of you survive. But the walls of the mansion are not deaf. Behind every closed door, whispers travel faster than light. Servants carry stories between rooms. Children overhear fragments of conversations never meant for them. You are careful, painfully careful, with what you reveal. Arguments, if they occur, happen in whispers. Disappointments are swallowed whole. Even sorrow must be elegant. The children, your heirs, your legacy, grow up within this gilded cage of order. They are dressed by others, taught by tutors, and raised to be symbols of the family, not individuals. Their lives are scheduled before they can speak. The boys learn Latin, manners, and the art of not showing emotion. The girls learn piano, embroidery, and how to faint beautifully at the appropriate moment. They will inherit your manners before they inherit your fortune. In the evenings, after dinner, you sometimes visit the nursery. The air smells faintly of milk and chalk, of soft blankets and candle wax. The children rise to greet you, trained to curtsy or bow. You smile, gentle but formal. You ask about their lessons, their health, perhaps their prayers. The nurse stands nearby, nodding approvingly at every exchange. The conversation lasts only minutes before you leave, closing the door softly behind you. Parental affection in this world is measured like sugar, just enough to sweeten, never enough to spoil. Your wife, meanwhile, retreats to her writing desk. The letters she composes are delicate, written on scented paper, filled with graceful phrases. Some go to her family, others to friends, some to acquaintances she must keep close for social advantage. Each word is crafted to maintain a web of politeness, a network that protects your family's standing. Through her letters, she manages alliances as skillfully as you manage business. In rare moments of honesty, perhaps late at night, the two of you share a look not quite affection, but recognition. You both know the truth. This life is not about happiness. It is about survival within the rules you were born to obey. You are not villains in this story, nor victims, but actors in a play that never ends. There are, of course, exceptions. Some couples defy the mold. A few find affection within the arrangement. Others find quiet rebellion. A letter left unread, a conversation too long with a guest at a party, a glance that lingers. But these are dangerous luxuries. Scandal can destroy not only a marriage, but an entire lineage. The very society that demands appearances also delights in tearing them down. And so, you keep playing your part. You attend the same events, speak in the same measured tones, smile in the same ways. Outsiders see harmony, a perfect couple, blessed by fortune, pillars of morality, but you and your wife know better. Harmony is not truth. It is choreography. Sometimes, on rare nights, the facade wavers. Perhaps she plays the piano softly in the drawing room, and you pause in the doorway, listening. The melody drifts through the air, like something fragile and human. For a fleeting moment, you remember a time before the duties, before the performance, before the endless expectations, when laughter could exist without calculation. Then the moment passes. You clear your throat, she lowers her hands, and the silence returns, perfectly composed. In this world, love is not the language of marriage. Respect, restraint, and ritual are, and while your union may lack warmth, it offers something the Victorians prized even more: stability. A legacy untouched by scandal, a name engraved in the ledgers of society, and the illusion, perhaps the most valuable illusion of all, that everything is as it should be. Outside, the night deepens. The servants extinguish the lamps one by one, leaving only the faint glow from the nursery window. You glance at it as you pass, that small square of light flickering against the dark sky. It is both a comfort and a reminder that in this house, in this life, nothing truly belongs to you except your role in the story. Tomorrow, the same dance begins again. Breakfast, visits, smiles, appearances. But for now, the mansion sleeps. Its silence filled with the sound of legacy, breathing through its walls. The mansion sleeps, but its spirit lives on, not in its chandeliers or carriages, not in its tapestries or grand staircases, but in something quieter, more enduring, the endless need to appear. The more you think about it, the more the realization settles in your mind, like dust on polished wood, that the Victorian obsession with reputation never truly died. It simply changed clothes. Step out of that candlelit century and into ours, and you will still see the same performance, only played upon a brighter stage. The drawing rooms have turned into screens. The calling cards have become social media profiles. The measured conversation at dinner parties now unfolds in digital posts and curated feeds. We no longer bow to one another in marble halls, but we chase the same validation, likes, hearts, shares little tokens of approval that whisper the same thing the Victorians longed to hear. You are seen. You belong. In the 19th century, a family portrait hung in the parlor told visitors everything they needed to know: wealth, status, morality. Today, we hang our portraits online, filtered and framed, each image chosen with care, each caption rehearsed for maximum grace. The difference is only in technology, not intention. The corset has become the algorithm. The mirror has become the camera. The audience, larger but just as judgmental. Just as Victorian society feared gossip whispered behind fans, we fear the invisible conversations happening behind screens. The same anxiety hums beneath both worlds: the fear of being misunderstood, excluded, or forgotten. The Victorian elite performed perfection under candlelight. We perform it under pixels. They smiled through discomfort. We post through exhaustion. And in both centuries, the applause feels fleeting. Even the structure of our days echoes theirs. We wake, we dress, we curate our image before the world. The rituals are faster now, more mechanical, but the purpose is the same: to signal that we are composed, productive, desirable, successful. The morning toilette of a Victorian lady, surrounded by mirrors and servants, is not so far from a modern influencer arranging her lighting before a camera. Both are acts of transformation. Both are rehearsals of identity. The Victorians lived in constant fear of scandal. We live in constant fear of judgment. One careless remark at a dinner table could destroy a reputation then. One careless post can do the same now. They had the gossip columns. We have the comment section. They sought to control the story of their lives through etiquette and silence. We try to do the same through curation and design, and like them, we mistake visibility for worth. They hosted grand balls to prove belonging. We craft perfect feeds to prove relevance. They guarded their private letters. We guard our private messages. They feared the whisper of servants. We fear the viral rumor. We have changed our architecture, our clothing, our speed, but not our hunger to be admired. Even our idea of success still carries that same Victorian contradiction. The more we possess, the less free we feel. The rich then were trapped by ritual. The rich now are trapped by attention. The servants have vanished, but in their place we have systems, deadlines, algorithms, silent workers that demand constant supervision. The drawing rooms may be gone, but the stage remains. Yet, not everything in this comparison is bleak. For all their restraint, the Victorians understood something we often forget, that civility, grace, and patience have their own power. Their obsession with appearance was exhausting, yes, but it also taught endurance. In their stiff clothing and strict manners, they built an unspoken discipline, the ability to hold composure amid chaos. Perhaps that, too, has something to teach us. But there is another, more haunting truth, that our generation, like theirs, is always performing under pressure, the pressure to be perfect in public and content in private. The same loneliness that haunted those candlelit mansions still lingers in the glow of our phones at midnight. We scroll, they strolled, both searching for something genuine in a world built on display. Imagine for a moment if a Victorian millionaire could see us now, sitting alone in apartments glowing with electric light, faces reflected in tiny mirrors of glass, each person, both actor and audience, in their own endless play. Would they envy us or pity us? Would they see progress or only the same gilded trap painted in modern colors? Because if we strip away the lace, the hashtags, the etiquette, and the filters, we find the same human heart underneath. wanting to be liked, to be respected, to be remembered. The Victorians feared social exile. We fear digital irrelevance. They sought grace in manners. We seek it in presentation. And both worlds, for all their differences, are built on this same fragile hope that someone, somewhere, is watching and approves. Perhaps that is why their world fascinates us still. Beneath its stiffness lies our reflection. We recognize their worries in our own, the quiet competition, the fatigue of maintaining perfection, the longing for authenticity. They built houses of brick and decorum. We build profiles and personas. Both shimmer beautifully. Both can crumble with a single misstep. So maybe, when we read about the Victorians, about their corsets and calling cards, their rituals and restrictions, we should not laugh at their vanity. We should recognize it, because, in truth, we are still living in their mirror. The only difference is that the light is brighter, and the audience never sleeps. Outside, the fog of the old world has turned into the blue glow of our screens. But the performance continues, scene after scene, century after century, and we, like them, are still learning how to be real under the spotlight. The candles have burned low. The last echo of footsteps fades down the marble corridor. The great mansion stands silent once more, wrapped in fog and memory. Yet within that silence lies a truth that reaches far beyond the Victorian age, a truth that lingers in every human heart that has ever longed to be seen. We began this journey walking through a world of mirrors, silver trays, polished shoes, portraits, and etiquette. We watched the Victorian millionaire wake in luxury, dress in discomfort, dine in discipline, and perform grace before an unblinking audience. We saw a life wrapped in silk and ceremony, a world so beautiful it nearly concealed its own suffocation. But now, at the end of that long candlelit day, one question remains: what does it mean to live freely? To the Victorians, freedom was a word reserved for philosophy, not for daily life. Every motion, from the way they dressed to the way they breathed, was a rehearsal of expectation. Yet their story, this grand experiment in perfection, reveals something timeless. It shows us how easily people can confuse appearance with meaning, how the pursuit of admiration can slowly erode authenticity until nothing is left but the performance itself. When we look at their world from afar, we see the absurdity. A man so rich he cannot tie his own shoes. A woman so elegant she cannot take a deep breath. We shake our heads and say, what a strange time that must have been. But if we listen closely, we can hear an echo in our own. The same hunger for approval beats beneath our modern rhythm. The same careful self-editing. The same fear of imperfection. The Victorians bowed to etiquette. We bow to algorithms. They polished their silver. We polish our image. They feared whispers in drawing rooms. We fear comments beneath our posts. Both societies built prisons disguised as palaces. And yet, there is a choice that we, unlike them, can make. We can step off the stage. We can loosen the collar, unlace the corset, silence the performance, because the greatest luxury the Victorians never had, the one they built their lives trying to simulate, is the freedom to be ordinary. To laugh too loudly, to walk outside without being seen, to make mistakes and still be whole. Perhaps that is the lesson their glittering misery leaves behind. That comfort is not found in wealth, but in honesty. That true elegance is not silence, but sincerity. That no amount of marble or silver can buy the peace of a quiet, unguarded life. Imagine for a moment the Victorian millionaire sitting where you are now, watching the world unfold in color and motion, without servants, without scripts. Imagine him realizing that every ritual he upheld, every forced smile, every starched shirt, every whispered greeting was for an audience that forgot him the moment the curtain fell. History does not remember him for the way he dressed or dined. It remembers him for the era that trapped him, a time when perfection was everything, and joy was a private rebellion. And maybe, in our own way, we are still fighting the same battle, to be more than the roles we play. So as the last candle dies, and the mansion fades back into the past, let it stand not as a monument to grandeur, but as a reminder that we too live inside performances, some grand, some quiet, and that the only way to step out of them is to choose presence over perception, truth over polish, self over spectacle. Because freedom is not the absence of judgment, it is the courage to live as though judgment does not matter. If the Victorian age taught us anything, it is this: perfection can make you admired, but only authenticity can make you alive. And perhaps that is why history still whispers to us from its shadowed halls, not to impress, but to warn. Beneath all the lace and marble and etiquette, those people were human too. They wanted what we all want: peace, purpose, connection. They just never learned that these things cannot be staged. So tonight, as you turn off the lights and step away from the noise of the world, remember the mansion in the fog. Remember the man who had everything but rest. And promise yourself a simpler kind of wealth, one made not of possessions, but of quiet truth. Because to live freely, without the constant performance, without the invisible audience, is to have what every Victorian millionaire longed for and never found. And that, perhaps, is the only luxury that time can never take away. And so our long walk through the corridors of the Victorian mansion comes to an end. We have seen the elegance, the rituals, the perfection, and the quiet weight that lay beneath it all. The life of a Victorian millionaire shimmered like gold from a distance, but up close it was made of glass, fragile, cold, and easily broken. Behind the polished silver and candlelight was a simple truth that time never erases. When life becomes a performance, peace becomes impossible. As we step back into our own century, maybe we can carry something from their story, not their furniture or fashions, but their warning that appearances will always fade, that admiration will always pass, but sincerity, kindness, and the freedom to simply be remain the only treasures worth keeping. Thank you for walking quietly through history with me tonight, for pausing to listen to the echoes of another age, and finding a reflection of our own within it. If this story made you think, or simply helped you slow down for a moment, then it has done its work. Sleep well, dream softly, and remember, sometimes the most beautiful history lessons are the ones that remind us how to live today. Good night, everyone.